Welcome to the podcast that buffs your Hearthstone game. This is Velen's Chosen.
Not all who wander are lost.
Welcome everybody to Velen's Chosen. For those of you not watching the live show, I couldn't find the mute button fast enough and almost died in the pre-show. Brought to you by Boss Coffee, where Rob likes to die in the pre-show amidst many warnings from both his co-hosts and his wife.
Don't drink it. Don't do it.
105, where we're not about human health, but rather about, oh, sorry, not 105, 145. Goodness. I saw some crap, okay? Man. Goodness. I've seen some serious crap in the last 5 seconds. And I'm going to leave that cough in there for authenticity. That way I don't look like a complete, crazy person. Welcome to the show. We are a Hearthstone podcast where we sometimes talk about the game in the pre-show and in the beginning of the show, as you guys learned about Velen's Chosen international weather report last week. So this week,
and big spider news.
more this week from Spider-Man. This week we have a little bit more of a serious topic, which is why we are starting off strong with the memes, apparently. So let's meet our co-host. We got Eve Martin. If you're new here, she's the resident Canadian and best friend of the show. If you don't like Grant or you don't like me, Eve's the salt and light to the show.
Eve's the redemption of our show.
Oh my gosh. Wow, we're starting strong.
If you're not watching the YouTube, you're missing out this week, let me tell you. Okay,
they're
Grant,
building me up because later they're gonna tear me down.
That's the whole plan. You don't tell them our secrets. Grant from Texas, banished by the in-laws to the garage in amazing shadowy lighting of death. What's up, Grant?
Yes, I will not talk about the weather today because it will only ever be hot. But I will talk about my garage, which is worse than hot at the moment. If you're looking at the live video, it looks like I have a garage sale on one side and laundry on the other side. But that's just towels hanging out to dry because we went to the water park today. We went to the water park, yo, because Galveston's a dump. So for all of my Texas friends... So for my Texas friends, love it or you can love it or hate it. I hate Galveston, just for the record. Just saying. I don't like that place. But it's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah!
Okay, I gotta be honest up front. I had a friend of mine ask me, how much Hearthstone have you been playing lately? And I've been like,
enough,
none.
Okay? I have a show about it. Get off my back.
Here's the thing, every time I play, I just go on a losing streak. And even if I win for a little bit, I always end up back where I started, feeling angry and feeling like I had no progress. So I'm sorry, you guys. I'm just this is one of the times that I'm just taking a bit of a break, and I'm happy that there are other things about Hearthstone I love, like the lore, that keep me, doing things involved with Hearthstone while not actually playing it, because I'm not having fun playing right now. Gotta be honest with you.
Drawing cards and taking names.
I've been having a mixed reaction to Hearthstone lately. I hit rank 1 again for the second time since last week, having dropped back to 4. Ugh.
Yikes.
Because nothing was working. I'm pretty sure it was a nice healthy mixture of bad deck matchups and tilt and things like that, but I tried everything. I like a lot of the decks that are in the meta right now, and I enjoy playing most of them. And I even went so far as I'm going to subscribe to HS Replay, and I'm going to recon the crap out of this meta. And guess what? It don't work, or it didn't work for me.
Subscribe.
So I subscribed. I gave them my $5 and change, and I was all excited about it. And
changed because you didn't get any return.
It was mostly I'm wondering if this is even doing any good. So I was like, you know what, deck I haven't really played a lot of. I'm going to play some Even Warlock. Because every time I play that deck, I feel like it's just really strong. Even if I beat it, it's like, man, that's just a strong deck. I mean, being able to put a mountain giant and a what's the Reaver, the 4 cost that's a 7/7, Faceless Manipulator Part 2.
Yeah.
It,
If they're below 15 health, then it's a
yeah,
7/7. Yeah.
you put that up with taunt, you have 15 damage on the board. It's amazing how you can swing games. But I basically went from rank 4 and 3 stars to rank from yesterday to rank 1 and 2 stars just about an hour ago, and then I hit a bunch of like super awful matchups, and I wasn't even tilted. Because like, okay, well, I lost, whatevs. I wasn't cussing and swearing at my phone or anything like that.
That's an improvement. That's good.
For me, that's good though, because like that means I'm in control of my emotions, and it means that at least I have a higher probability of playing well. And I always keep telling myself the upside is I don't have to grind a 5 next month. I don't have to grind a 5 next month. But yeah, it was cool. And so playing those decks last week, it was Shaman. This week it was Warlock. I like winning, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of winning, but I don't get a lot of satisfaction on not being able to really pin down the meta. That drives me nuts. And I even tried to go the
Talked about
studious
that in the pre-show a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Tried to be the good student and just tried to recon and think about it and look at the matchups, look at the data, if you will.
Yeah.
And like when the data is saying one thing, but you're seeing another thing consistently, it creates a really bad dissonance in what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure.
I feel like it makes it worse. Like if you didn't know what the data was, it wouldn't be as bad.
Right. It's like,
right.
well, I mean, because like last week, the data was saying like at rank 2 to 1, 3 to legend was like Zoo Warlock had a really high win rate, and I was like, Zoo? Well, it makes sense because Shaman was good, and Shaman's a lot like Zoo, you know. But Shaman doesn't have that really awesome end game like you dropping Gul'dan and getting all the demons back. So I wasn't sure. I tried it and it won a couple games, lost a couple games, kind of went 50-50 on it. And I tried all the Druid stuff because Druid always seems strong, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets frustrating because sidebar conversation. Like I have been getting up like every other game, every third game has been against a legend player, and I'm not in legend yet, and that sucks. I actually played against a rank 156 legend player.
That's really high.
Let's transition into the news, guys, because this is not abnormal, and I know Grant wanted to take a little bit of the sidebar on the news section about this.
It's abnormal in that it shouldn't be happening, but it's normal that it is happening.
That's right, Eve. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I follow a lot of pros, and I know you guys do too. And it seems like there's been an influx, at least the last week or so, of pros saying like, "Look, why am I getting matched up with rank 3 players, not legend 3, like ladder 3,
it's a lose
like below legend
too, right?"
Yeah.
Because like if they lose, they lose a crap ton of rank.
Yeah.
I was reading somebody who actually worked the stats out, and they were like, in order to climb right now, I need to get a 70% win rate or higher to actually get any points.
That's
at
ridiculous.
All. And that's like impossible for me. So it's not even worth it for me to play Hearthstone at all right now. So that seems really awful.
It's bad. I mean, like because in theory, if I'm good enough to make legend, I should be able to beat a legend player, in theory. But people who are already at legend or have been at legend, there's a good bet that they're way better than me, right? There's a good bet that a person sitting at 156 legend is a different tier of player than I myself am, regardless of whether or not I have made legend or can get to legend or anything like that. It's just reasonable to assume so.
Yeah.
And getting matched up against that person, not even when I'm at rank 1, but when I'm at rank 3 and 4, that's not, I'm just going to say, that's not fair. That's putting me in, especially this far along in the month. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So why is that happening? And it really is, it's very discouraging and demoralizing, because when you see like high rank legend player and you're not even there yet, you're like, look, they're not going to cut me any slack. You know what I mean? They're going to play me just as if I was a rank, they're rank 2 legend and I'm rank 1 legend, and they're trying to take my spot.
They have so much more to lose.
They have way more to lose. I lose a star, but they lose hundreds of rank. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they worked really hard for. And so it creates a really bad environment for the climb, I think, for all parties, because people like me are like, well, here's a problem. This is more than likely a loss. And furthermore, a lot of people who are derping around in legend are going to play all kinds of weird stuff that, most ladder decks aren't equipped to beat a lot of times, like I played a guy playing Control Warrior that he didn't list it. I assumed he was Legend because he was running King Mosh and a couple other things, and like stuff that I wasn't ready for. And I just, oh well, I didn't know you would have had that card. Okay, what do I do now? And of course he trounced me. Granted, it was a bad matchup anyway, so it wasn't like I felt too bad about it. But still, when you have no ground for having a clue of what you can anticipate, it puts you on the back foot from the first moment. But you don't usually realize it until like the third or fourth turn, and then you've made all these assumptions and stuff that most people make when you're playing on ladder, because that's how you climb, is you have to kind of know the decks. We talk about it over and over again, but it puts you at a disadvantage, and you have more to lose than maybe they do if they're derping around a like quote unquote dumpster ladder. And if it's a high legend player who's trying to grind out and be competitive and like make HCT points and whatever, they have everything to lose because they can't phone in a game on you. They're going to just beat you with whatever deck they're at. They're probably much more advanced, I guess you could say. So I don't know. It's been really frustrating, and I'm on the lower end of the complaint, and I can't even imagine what the higher end pros and stuff are dealing with.
What I would like to see is Blizzard saying something, to say that they acknowledge that this is happening and that they're working on it, or just say something on the subject. Because to hear silence when this has actually been a topic for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the first I heard about it was this is intended. Like, this is going to happen,
right,
and it's just a function of the new matchmaking, and we can't really do anything about it. But yeah, I don't think this is something that's sustainable.
No, it's definitely
for
not.
the pros or for people trying to get to Legend either. And I agree with you. There is a difference. Just because you can get to Legend, I mean, the Legend people who make it there in the first couple of days of the month, right? It took them 3 days to get to Legend, and now they're in the high, 100s and double digits of Legend. There is a whole lot of difference between someone who just got through Legend door and somebody who's up at the high tiers.
Yeah, and I mean, we have what's our thanks for the bits, by the way, StarCraft 2 forever. The talking in the chat here for the live show, they were saying that they messaged Blizzard CS, which is the connectivity or kind of like the helpline for Blizzard games, and they said that this is the typical frustrating Blizzard phrase that you'll get, which is working as intended. But I don't know. I feel like this has been an issue ever since the rework, and it's been like small pockets. It's been really obvious sometimes and really soft other times, and at large, the rest of the community, both top Legend players and just 5 and up players, are just like kind of fed up with it when it happens, because it's just not good. And
I thought there would be more Legend players. Like, isn't that the idea with the ranked floors, that there was going to be more Legend players? So wouldn't they have an even bigger pool of people to draw from to match up against Legend players? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, like I tend to agree, but like the other frustrating thing about Blizzard CS or the community that they are requesting is they keep asking you to go to their forums instead of filing tickets. For whatever reason, there's a lot of times they're like, hey, we haven't seen this as a documented issue or an internal report with ladder problems, so please go submit it on the forums. It's like,
they want you to go through different channels.
I mean, I don't really care that they want us to go talk in the forums. I don't even care that the forums are thriving communities. Like, that's great. But I really, really don't like it when they say, like, hey, we have this official channel that you can communicate with us. Please go talk to me on the other one. It's like, hey, can you talk to me in this Discord? No, you have to talk to me in this one. Or, I mean, it's just like Ring Around the Rosie. It's like, well, do you want me to email you? Do you want me to text you? Do you want me to use this application that your buddy used when he was one time in China? Like, what is the deal? Okay.
Well, here's the problem: is Blizzard is a consumer-based company, right? They make their money because people like us pay them money to use their product because we like it and we want to give them more of it if it's good, right? If you're going to be that kind of a business, be that kind of a business. Don't be a bureaucracy. You know what I mean? Don't make us like fill out everything in triplicate and file the right channel. Oh, you didn't dot one I and cross a T, so you got to do it again. I mean, that's kind of just it makes me feel like there's shenanigans. Now, I don't think that's the way it is, but that's the way it feels, and that's important for a lot of people because a lot of people don't base their opinions on reality; they base on what they think the reality is. So it gets it's super frustrating. In
I
my
do wonder
mind,
what the logic is. Like, why do they point you towards the forums instead of just saying, "I got your message, I'll
Why does
pass it on,"
anybody
or
still
whatever?
have forums
Like,
as an official channel of working in 2018? Let's be honest.
right?
Forums died
This is
after
my
2000,
question.
okay?
yeah, I thought
Like,
forums
we're
were
not
something from the
trying to
90s.
communicate an official Blizzard channel on AOL Instant Messenger anymore. Why are forums still a thing?
You know what? Twitter is probably a harder place to get messages reliably unless you're constantly scanning it. The way that Twitter does things is not reliable
Well-
to make sure you got all your messages, make sure you covered everybody and respond to everybody.
Yeah.
So
All jokes
maybe
aside,
that's why.
All jokes aside, I do understand a little bit of the forums because the forums are specifically linking an issue with a player's BattleNet. That's the only thing, okay, that I can
Okay,
say
yeah.
legitimately is like a good
That's
reason.
true.
However, why are we still remaining on a forum-based, account-based thing when we should be able to do this in-game? If we have an issue,
Yeah.
we should have a tool and a button to click and file a ticket. Or better yet, if you really want to go super meta and make this even slightly more difficult yet uniform, you have it in BattleNet Launcher. You click something, you file the ticket, you select your game, your account's there, and you send it off. And you're
Can
not
you do
really
it from the
interested-
BattleNet launcher
No,
right
you
now?
can't.
Can you file a report?
You
That's
can
silly.
only
I thought
that you
report
could.
a claim on like reporting somebody's battle tag or something like
On
that.
their website. Yeah, or yeah, you can like that.
That's it. It's really irritating. It's like, why have we built this intense infrastructure for players to network and stuff? And for starters, one, the friends list is limited to 200, and two, you can't like reasonably file a ticket or have a conversation like you used to have outside of going to like official forums or going into your email accounts and like all of these super secure things. It's like, BattleNet's supposed to be secure. Why can't you just give it to us there? And I don't know what the holdup is for us not having this since BattleNet launched. This should have been in.
Okay, so they've got a thing for support, which takes you out to a web page, and a thing for feedback, which automatically takes you out to a web page. But yeah, you're right. They don't have like a
Yeah, their infrastructure is linking you around the
Yeah.
merry-go-round of or spiderweb of network, and instead of having it all centralized.
yeah. Instead of just having a button that says report issue and you can put it in like a little window that pops out and put whatever your grievance is in there, it sends you to a page
Yeah.
where you start going through the press 1 if you would like to complain about World of Warcraft. That sort of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, it
I
could
mean,
be any number of things, right? Like, it doesn't have to just be this one hiccup. There's so many other reasons that you want to keep this network. Like, they have an entire news tab. You can like read all of the updates for whatever game you want in the news tab, but you can't like file, hey, I think something's wrong with my game. Like, the most important communication with a game is communication with the development team and submitting feedback and submitting issues, and they're saying, look, you need to go to the website and fill out this report instead of doing it through the client.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can't click on a person in chat and be like report player or anything like that the way you can in
Yeah.
Blizzard or
I mean,
in
in
World
theory,
of
they
Warcraft.
should
Sorry.
be able to launch the web page through the client and then just solve it all together, right? Like, I'm okay with going to a different web page if you could just not like launch a browser and just like use it right there. And it sounds really fruitless, and why would you do this? But I mean, Hearthstone is a mobile game where you have issues on the go and in your comfort of your own home, where all of these other games that are
Yeah.
on the sidebar, you can't do that. So they need to figure something out. And probably within a reasonable timetable, they need to fix the issue and then maybe fix the bigger infrastructure, kind of larger term. But I do think we're getting it. Excuse me. I'm personally getting a little negative on this, and I didn't even plan to talk about this today. So let's just kind of move
If that
on
happens,
because
we do
it
that.
happens. But it's kind of like the Reddit syndrome, where like somebody mentions something that really upsets them, and you didn't realize you hated it until they told you about it. So just keep that in
it's
mind.
called mob mentality,
I
Ralph.
also hate about that too.
It's
You know what? I just
confirmation
happen to
bias
have
and
my
mob mentality.
pitchfork. hey, look, a torch. Where'd that
Oh,
come
snap,
from?
I have this fancy torch. Let's go put it on the wall as a sconce.
I
Sorry,
think
it's
the first step
really
is they
bad.
need to admit it's actually a problem, which so far they
Yeah.
haven't. So if they do that, then we can start
Blizzard
talking about
Anonymous.
solutions. But yeah, they need to. You need to admit first that you have a problem.
12 steps, baby. so,
All right.
All right, let's keep
So-
going. News update number 2. There is a okay, quick and easy. Tavern Brawl this week was Shadow Reflections. You basically can choose any number of cards you'd like, and the rest of the cards in your 30 card deck will be Shadow Reflections, like you would get when you play. Shoot, what's the name?
The
for
Rogue DK?
Valera? Something
Valera?
Valera. Yes.
Hollowed?
Valera the Hollow. That's it. Valera the Hollow
Valera the
will
Hollow.
give you
Yeah.
a Shadow Reflection in your hand every turn. Well, this one is just like actual cards in the deck that you can draw. Lots of people were doing some sort of shenanigans to kind of win. You got like discounting and playing spells.
And they don't
like,
disappear at the end of the turn, right? So you can
No.
draw a bunch of them, and they'll stay in your hand unless you go to use them.
Yeah,
So,
they
yeah.
stay in your hand.
But it's really trippy playing with
Mm-hmm.
discounted versions of cards, which people found really fun when you're running like Radiant Elementals or you're running Sorcerer's Apprentices. Those were really fun. And then also the other one that people were doing was just like having it be a free echo for like cheaper minions, or you could just use a cheap minion with echo and be like, really
Yeah, I did
interesting.
Quest Priest and just put a bunch of 1-cost Death Rattle minions and waited until I had like 4 of them and just went boom, 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 boom.
I waited until I had
Nice.
the nut draw, so I played like 4 or 5 games just to do it because I wanted to play Dragon Soul. So
Yeah, that's what I did.
I didn't even get a great turn. The guy was just like, "Oh my gosh, he played Dragon Soul and he has something on the board. I'm done." Like just the typical salt.
It's the only way to win in
It's like,
that.
hey,
man.
that's
Didn't
fine
let
with
you
me. I don't have to play
play.
this out. I'm only here for a card pack.
Ditto.
So
Got too much ladder to grind. Ugh.
there's also an update that we're actually not going to discuss this week. Normally we would, but we had an interesting topic about game addiction we want to talk about today. So we're going to forego talking about it, but I will put the link in the show notes for the Witchwood mission design and fun fact from Grant about this on how to pronounce Paul's last name. We have
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Fun fact is Rob, spell it for us.
Okay, Paul's last name is Nguyen, and it is a Vietnamese name.
Yes, and if you ever see that name, it's pronounced Win.
Nguyen.
It's not Nguyen or whatever people. It's Win. And the reason I know this is because there's a lot of Vietnamese in Houston back when the war was happening. A lot of people immigrated from Vietnam to. This is one of the areas that they immigrated to, and one of my relatives happens to be Vietnamese actually. But it's pronounced Win. So if you ever see that, that's how you pronounce it. It's not Nguyen or whatever it is. It's Win. Paul
I
Win.
remember that from now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty common Vietnamese name, actually. That's why I can say that. It's not like some random esoteric type of knowledge. It's pretty common if you're in the area. So
Neat.
I want to highlight one
The
thing
more
from
you
this
know.
that made me really laugh when they were talking about some things with Houndmaster Shaw. They said they created 3 of his prized hounds, and once Shaw and his dog started to really take shape, everything felt more connected and fun, maybe too much fun. And wasn't Shaw able to defeat Hagatha by himself in early playtests? So yeah, they were like, holy crap, yeah, he's way too strong. But they had his three pets names, which one of them you can actually play with for sure. I don't know about the other 2 because I haven't really got offered them as unique cards in the dungeon run / monster hunt. But one of them's called Butch. It's a 4-mana 1/1 with Rush, but it has +1/+1 for every friendly beast that died that game. So he gets to be
Oh, boy.
a 4/1 rusher that's huge. And I ended up winning, I think, my dungeon run with this card the one time I beat it. And then there's the other 2 names of the dogs are great. So it's like Butch and Bubba and Princess are the names of his 2 like bulldogs.
nice.
And listen to this.
I love it.
Bubba is a 7-mana 9/9 beast. Battlecry summons 6 1/1 bloodhounds to attack an enemy minion.
So
So it's
they
like
all
you
come out and they
summon
just attack.
6 1/1s and they all rush it.
Like
So it's kind of like
automatically, or do you actually do
so
it?
it's kind of like a 7-mana 9/9 Battlecry deal 6 damage, but instead it like restricting you to have an empty board, and then it like summons all these hounds and they go like pew, 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 pew. It's like a machine
Nice.
gun. That sounds really
Oh,
cool,
that'd be
right?
so sweet.
Did they
Yeah.
bark or snarl like
I have
every
no
time they
clue.
hit?
My guess would be the same as the Hero Power Hounds would be my guess.
Oh, probably.
Because it said
Probably.
Bloodhounds.
Yeah.
And then the Princess is a 5/5 for 5. Battlecry, gain death rattles of 3 random minions in your deck. So it's kind of like a souped up version of Seeping Oozling.
Mm-hmm.
But cool
Wow.
stuff there on some of these cards. They have some more things on this, but again, we're not gonna cover it. So
Yeah.
let's keep it
Let's move on.
moving. Eve, you want to talk about the last thing here before we get into the main topic?
They talked about how they're changing fireside gatherings. They're going to allow you to have private fireside gatherings in more relaxed settings with friends or coworkers, all while enjoying the perks of a public fireside gathering. So
That means I can finally get Nemsy.
yes. See,
I can?
this is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
the
Yes.
Hearthstone,
Unlisted
fireside
fireside
card deck.
gatherings will be eligible to receive Nemsy Necrofizzle if they fulfill all hosting prerequisites. This means having an established tavern, and you can go to the website and learn how to do that. You have to be eligible for the You will be eligible for the fireside gathering card back. A bunch of different things. Go to the website. If you were concerned that there was nothing in your area and you could never get Nemsy Necrofizzle, this might be exactly what you're looking for, what you're waiting for to happen.
Sweet.
You want to know how much
Yeah.
Nemsy cost me? A couple $1,000s and a really long plane flight to BlizzCon. That's how I got Nemsy. How about you?
Worth.
You fits in the office.
It might just take Nemsy to make me want to play Warlock ever again after Voidlord. And then there was one other thing.
Awesome. That's the only reason you get Nemsy. To tilt people off the
Where
face
did
of
we
the
have
earth.
it? Oh, yeah. There was a new thing that Frodan announced on his Twitter feed, Talkstone, which is a new video podcast hosted by your favorite Hearthstone casters. And they also have a brand new documentary series called The Tour. And you can check that out on twitch.tv/playhearthstone. I watched a little bit of it and it was super interesting. I liked watching the different casters talk about like their favorite plays of the game and things that happened during the tournament. So check that out.
I love that this is basically turned into more of a recap for the competitive scene because of how busy it is and how long the games can be and the series is. So it can like point you to specific things. And on top of that, the labeling of calling it Talkstone is like the Twitch meme of when the production is having some issues like matching the players. They're trying to get people set up and the casters are just sitting there waiting. So they're like trying to fill time by talking. And then all the people in the chat spam like Resident Sleeper, Talkstone, Resident Sleeper. Like,
Yeah.
it's just
And they
it's
just
really,
decided
really
to
good.
go with it. That's
I mean,
hilarious.
My guess is it's probably Frodan because Frodan and Eloise are like the meme king and queen of Twitch when it comes to like using emotes frequently in their chat. And Dog does it too quite a bit because of the dog emote. Yeah, I mean you can't
Mhm.
not use like a.
It's like
free-
Sports Center for Hearthstone.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I think we have quite a bit of time that we filled about things that we didn't even put in the show notes. So let's talk about the main topic, which is gaming addiction. And this is something that is really close to all of our hearts and a few people in the community, as we found out, as per the recommendation from others and encouragement for what Eve really wanted to talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk in the gaming community because things have been changing, I guess, in the United States about how they're going to be dealing with gaming addiction and how they're going to classify it and how it's going to be treated by the
World Health
What was-
Organization.
World Health
WHO.
Organization. Yeah.
Which
And
is
that
not
kind
a
of
U.S.
sparked.
organization,
Oh,
incidentally.
it isn't? Sorry. World Health
Mhm.
Organization. You're right. So that's not a
Yeah.
US thing. That's an everything thing.
That's right.
That's it. That's yeah. Mhm.
Hence the name World. Yeah, so it sparked a lot of conversation in our community, and there were kind of a lot of people not taking it very seriously and joking about it and saying, oh, 20 hours a week isn't that much. And I kind of thought it might be a good thing to share my story with gaming addiction and that it might help people. And it's a difficult story to tell, but I thought it might be a good thing to share it on the show. So this week we're going to have a special lore moment. It's not about Azeroth. It's about me and my story. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, because I don't really talk about myself that much on the show. I come from a family of 8 children and 2 parents, so a family of 10. And we lived in a pretty small house, only 3 bedrooms. So a lot of bunk beds were involved. And I've always been kind of an introvert. So really noisy, crowded house, I became an escapist early on. I was always looking for a way to disappear into another world. And to start out with that, for me, was books. I would read like thousands of books a year. I read so much that my mom actually started thinking I might have a problem. And it sounds kind of silly to say you have a problem reading books, like what harm could that be? But the lengths that I took it to was like, I got to the point where I could shut out the world around me whenever I read a book. I could like not hear anything around me. I was so deep into the book and so involved in it that I didn't hear what was going on around me or see anything that was going on around me. Like people in my family had to come up to me and touch me to get me to pay attention to them, physically interact with me before I'd like notice they were trying to talk to me. So I know for me personally, I have that kind of personality where I can get into something and get so involved in it that the rest of the world kind of disappears. And then when I got older and I had access to video games, that became something I obviously loved, because this is escapism in the truest sense of the word, where it's not just reading about another person's story and kind of putting yourself in their shoes. It's you're able to be the hero in the games that you play and you're interacting with it. And then there's feedback. Because the really addictive thing for me about video games was the feedback. It was like the positive reinforcement of when you put time into games, you get rewarded. And that's something that games are really good at, is making you want to keep playing because you're leveling up. You're getting more gear. You are exploring more of the map. You're understanding more of the world. Like whatever it is about the kind of game that you're playing, there's always some kind of progress that you're feeling in the game. And as an adult in life, sometimes we don't always get that sense of progress. When I got married and had 3 kids in 4 years, yes, my children are very close together. I had 3 little tiny babies to take care of, which, don't get me wrong, I love being a stay-at-home mom. It's what I always wanted to do. I'm not, like, trapped. Don't come save me. But I wasn't really prepared for the lifestyle. I didn't actually know what it was going to be like. And there are lots of times where you're bored, where being a housewife isn't exactly exciting. And so having video games where you can escape to a different world where it was adventurous and you were getting all of this positive feedback of you're doing things and you're seeing the return. Where when you take care of kids, you're not going to see a return for like 30 years. Because children don't generally turn around and say, "Thank you, Mom, for all of the things that you do for me." They're very self-involved, which is completely normal for children. And they're not constantly giving you feedback of, "You're doing a good job as a parent, you're doing a good job as a mom." And you kind of, unless you have somebody in your life that's giving you positive feedback, it's sort of, you have to keep yourself going. You have to have something that's keeping you continuing on. Because if you have a job, you have a paycheck. You have this thing that's really concrete that's like, you did a good job, here, have money. And a lot of times in jobs, you have coworkers that you work with where they're like, "Hey, good job on this project you were doing," or whatever. You have the support of people around you that are encouraging you and complimenting you. If you have a good job, you might have a shitty job and it might not be like that. But if you're a housewife and you're a stay-at-home mom, you're alone a lot and you don't have a lot of that positive reinforcement. And so that's why I started playing video games a lot. And it got to the point, especially with World of Warcraft, I don't blame Blizzard, but they do make very, very good games. It got to the point where I was playing 11 hours a day. It got, over 60 hours a week. And this was like me getting up in the morning, feeding my kids, and then putting them in, one of those swinging, rocking high chairs, and feeding them and putting them in front of the TV, and then playing World of Warcraft. And then feeding them lunch, and then playing World of Warcraft. And then feeding them dinner, and playing World of Warcraft. And putting them to bed, and playing World of Warcraft. And eventually, like, the guilt would get to me of them not having a good life. And I would take them outside and I would go to the park and I would go down to the beach and I'd be like, "Okay, this is better. We're doing things together." But it would only last for a certain amount of time, and then I'd be back playing World of Warcraft. And there are parental locks that you can put on World of Warcraft so that you can shut it off if you choose at certain times so that you can't access it. This is for the parents who want to know how much time their kids are playing. You can say, I don't want them to be able to play between 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening. And if they try to log in, it just says this account is locked and you can't get in without a password. So I did that to myself so that I wouldn't play during the day. And I would only play in the evening after my kids were asleep so that I'd spend the day with them and play with them and take care of them and be a good parent. The problem was I knew the password. So a time would come where I'd be like missing my guildmates and wondering what they were doing and be like, I'll just check in. I'll just see how people are going and like what they're doing. Because you feel like you're falling behind if you don't play a lot in World of Warcraft. Everyone's getting ahead of you. And
There's always a carrot to chase.
yeah, it's a big time sink to keep pace if you want to be at the top of your game. If you want to be, the high level guilds and be progressive with everyone else, it's a lot of time sink. So I didn't keep to that for very long, even though I put the lock on myself. I knew the password. I should have given it to my husband and not told myself what the password was, but I did not do that because I wanted to give myself an opening if I wanted to get back into the game. So it got really bad. I played World of Warcraft for 5 years. And before I went and did this episode, I actually decided I was going to sit down with my kids and ask them what they remembered about that time, about when Mom played World of Warcraft a lot. And they said they don't remember anything.
That's a mercy.
Yeah.
Ignorance can be bliss sometimes when they don't know what it is, which is great.
And the other thing is that my husband was working a lot, so he didn't know. He had no idea. He just figured, she's taking care of the kids. She's taking care of the house and everything. She's doing what she's supposed to be doing. And addictive people are good at hiding things. Good at pretending everything's okay and this hasn't gone too far. And I would have friends who would tell me, you need to do things for yourself. You need to have me time. And in my head, I was going, no, I don't. I got enough me time. I have too much me time. Like, don't encourage me. Don't encourage this habit.
Pendulum swing, yeah.
Yeah. But it got to the point eventually where I had this readout of how much time I had been playing over the week.
Mm.
And my husband saw it one day and he was like, what? What is this? Like, and it hit him like, you can't possibly have time. If this is how much you're spending on World of Warcraft, then you can't possibly have time left over to be taking care of the kids. Like, this is not mathematically possible. And so we sat down and I had like a big, when you hit rock bottom and you realize what you've been doing and how it's affecting your family. And I sold my account because I knew that if it was still there, there was a possibility that I'd go back to it and that I'd start playing again. So I sold it, I think, for like $120. I had like all the rarest mounts in the game and like over 10,000 achievement points and like all the things that the people who try to sell big accounts want. So it went pretty quick. And it was just like, all right, nothing. I can't play games anymore ever again. And we know that didn't work out. But I know that like how bad it got is always in the back of my head. It's the thing that keeps me checking myself constantly to go, okay, are you getting too far into this? Are you getting too attached to this? Are you giving too much time and too much focus and too much energy to this and putting it above everything else in your life? Because I didn't have any friends. I didn't spend time with my family. And that is kind of one of the hall signs of an addict is when they draw away from everything. And this thing that they're concentrating on becomes the be all and the end all and the most important thing in their life. And at one point when I was playing, I could not imagine my life happy without video games and specifically World of Warcraft. It had become such a big center of my life of like the thing that I went to every day that made me happy, that gave me positive feedback. And another part of it is the guild. Because when you have a bunch of people who count on you, who want you to be there to play with them. And if you play a specific role, like I was a main tank for a raid, which is in a group of 25, there's like 2 tanks. So they're very specific roles that can only be filled by those people and they can't be replaced. So I would always feel like, well, if I don't log on and if I'm not there, then they can't raid, they can't do things. So I felt beholden to show up and be there, and I'd be letting them down that if I didn't go and I didn't play my part. And also the inverse of that is I got a lot of praise. I got a lot of people telling me I was really good and good job, and like that was a great fight. And it was always a great feeling when we'd take down a difficult boss. It was like you solved a really hard puzzle, and you got a lot of praise and adulation for being really good at what you did. And it was hard to turn my back on that and walk away from it. But it all... Go ahead.
I was gonna say, were you scared, like when the possibility of like getting rid of your account, did that kind of make you nervous, uptight, scared?
Yeah, I didn't know what life was going to be like without it because it had been such a big chunk of time. And then all of a sudden I had a big hole of time in my life that I had to fill with something else.
Mm.
And I didn't know what that was going to be. And I mean, obviously, my children, taking care of them and being present, being involved in their lives. But even for every parent, there is a time where it's like, okay, I've played enough Cars for today. And I've, colored in enough coloring books for today. And I think I've put in like a good amount of present, I'm here, parent time. And now what? Like, what do I do?
There's that parenting moment where you realize it's like, well, it's not even healthy for me to be doing activities with them this much. Like, they need to have their time to play and creativeness to be alone. Sometimes the kids just want to go play Legos by themselves. Like, they need to be creative on their own instead of having mom or dad make up the designs and whatever they want to do, and they can have a chance to be alone and let their minds wander and get into trouble, God forbid.
Yeah, it's pretty controlling if you're like over your children's
Right.
shoulder all the time, controlling their play, and they don't have independent thought as much. But then there's too much freedom and too much
Right.
being left to their own devices. Yeah,
It can get dangerous, actually.
exactly.
Mhm.
So, I mean, Hearthstone for me was like a gateway drug. It was like something that could touch World of Warcraft, something that was involved in some way with it, where I could feel like I had a piece of it without being something that was going to take up, hours and hours and hours and hours of time. Except for that one time I grinded for Legend. That was pretty intense. But I just have to keep backing away from things. Like, I have to keep a watch on myself whenever I get into a game. Destiny, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Excuse me. It's something that I have to constantly be aware of, that's me. That's my personality. I try to escape into a different world because this world can be, awful, depressing, stressful, and not always rewarding in obvious ways. In games, they're very obvious. You know what? That made me think of Hearthstone in a different way when I was going through what I was going to say for gaming addictions on the show. We get really upset when our work is not rewarded in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of other games, when you put in hours, you level up, you get more gear, you progress in a very obvious way. So as gamers, people who play other games than Hearthstone, we're used to this kind of method of, if I put time and effort in, I'm rewarded. And so when you play Hearthstone and you put time and effort in and you don't climb and you don't progress in an obvious way, I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes and a lot of anger comes from Hearthstone players, because that's not the way a lot of games work. You do see something as a reward for all of your hard work, and sometimes you spend 5 hours and you're right back where you started. And
So
it's not as...
let's transition a little bit out of this now that I think that we're kind of at a point where we are kind of revisiting the past and were able to get most of the story out. And you can feel free to go back in on it, Eve, as you need. I'm just trying to get a read on where we're at.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I want Grant to see if he can comment on this, because I know that I can see the gears turning in his head while we're doing the live stream. I can see him thinking through this. And as a teacher, and as likely all three of us running a podcast, it's not like we're above and beyond where Eve went. with this in the past. It just means that we can really track with her, and I want Grant to maybe comment on his thoughts here.
Well, I think let's put it this way. I've been told different things and I've read different things over the years about what is an addiction. And the one I always come back to, and it takes different quantities of time, but I was always told you're addicted to something when you are in the quiet of your mind and there's nothing to distract you. What are you thinking about? Where does your mind always go? So like if you're driving down the road and you're thinking, you're the radio, let's say the radio breaks and your podcasting device breaks and you have nothing to distract you, where does your brain go? Does it go to a variety of different things and cycle through, or does it go, I want to play this game, or I want to go drink a beer, or and I'm not talking like, man, I just want to relax my heart. Like if you're like people that I know that are alcoholics would say that's where their brain goes. First chance they would get, that's what they're thinking about. They might be at work, they may not be drinking anything, but they're thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Another thing I've heard is, what do you think of first thing in the morning when you wake up? When you get out of bed, what's the first thing you think of?
Right. Well, yeah. And sometimes I like what Eve was saying, like, she said she was doing 11 hours a day. Addiction doesn't necessarily have, and keep in mind, let me just qualify this. Me and Rob and Eve are not experts on like psychology definitions of what addiction is and is not. So don't say Rob, Grant, and Eve said. We're just telling you our opinions, the way we've
and I'm sharing my story.
That's
all. That's it.
Sharing your story.
The difference between Hearthstone and Talkstone, ladies and gents. Okay.
Like we're talking like 60 plus hour a week. That's a time representation of an addiction, but it can also manage your life in different ways. Like you can
manifest differently.
When you start building your life around something, like let's say I'm at work and I build my breaks around how many games I can get in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or I start making my time at home built around like how much time can I play Hearthstone? Like you start managing your schedule to that. That may not mean you may not even get 20 hours a weekend, but if you're doing that all the time and your life is revolving around it, that's probably a good bet that you're facing some type of addiction. Like I know for me, like and furthermore, the addiction may not be necessarily as clear, at least from my experience of what it is. Like for example, somebody could say you are addicted to Hearthstone. My wife would tell you that that's not the case. She would say, well, no, you're addicted to not being bored. And like from my angle, like I am the kind of person that I have pursued a variety of different things very hard. I don't ever do anything kind of half-cocked. I try to jump in. Either I do it like 100% or I don't do it.
Yeah.
That's just kind of my MO in life. It's just the way I am. So like years, like it's been different things. Like for me, it was for a long time music. That's all I ever did. It's all I ever cared about. It's all I ever thought about. I would get up in the morning and I would go and practice. People would say, hey, come do something fun. I'm like, nope, I got to practice. Nope, no, I got to practice. Eventually people stopped asking. And then felt like I achieved a certain amount of success there. And then I went on to different things that I was like, well, let's see what to do now. And then I got really into foreign language. And I would just study foreign language. And I really wanted to learn German. That's all I thought about. Every moment I had, I did that. And then it was electronic music. And then it was Hearthstone. And then it was all these different things. Almost like
something.
Filling the void with something. And it's kind of like it's like the Thaddeus Toad character in The Wind in the Willows, is he would get on these manias. He would get obsessed with like a motor car or an airplane or a coach or something would completely saturate his attention. And that's all he cared about. And he would sacrifice everything on the altar of getting whatever that thing was. And for me, I see like an arc in my particular life about when I played Hearthstone. When I first picked it up, it was the same as Eve. It's like, oh, cool. Hey, there's like a Blizzard card game. Cool. I want to try that. And I played it super casual. But the moment I just started assigning personal worth to it, validation, like, oh man, I'm not a good player until I make legend. Well, I'm not a good player until I make legend more than once. Well, I'm not a good player until I make legend every month. Well, I'm not a good player until I double legend every month. You know, you see that the progression never ends. It's literally infinite. And if you're a goal setting kind of person, and so you start, and when you get that high five from everybody, I mean, the first time you hit legend, you just feel like it's elation, and
It's like
you
a
want
I
high.
caught the
it's
car.
it's dopamine in your
Yeah.
brain, especially if you're the kind of person that believes, and not just been taught, but believes that if I work for A, then I should get B. And the bummer part about Hearthstone in particular, about as a game versus a lot of other games, is there's no guarantee. And that gets into that weird realm of, well, I believe I can make legend. If I just work hard enough, I'll make it. And then you start getting into, why am I not making it yet? Well, it's just may happen that you're just not good at the game. But nobody wants to admit that they're not good at something, or that they couldn't get better at something, especially something as quote unquote simple as a video game.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And people believe like, well, it's just a video game, I should be able to do it. And so you start getting weird like little meta games in your mind going, well, what's wrong with me if I can't do that? And so it became a mission of like proving yourself. You sign so much self-worth into something that like that becomes the addiction. And it may not be an addiction in the sense, maybe I might be a bit of a misnomer. It could be more like the obsession. You know what I mean?
It sounds like pride to me, right? It's tied up in your pride in yourself and how you feel about yourself.
It could be a self-worth thing. Like I know I told my wife one day, I said, now I'm not even saying necessarily claiming an addiction here, although I might very well be, depending, because what Eve was talking about, it's like I've thought that way about Hearthstone. Like this morning, I was like sitting at rank high 2. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna try and hit legend today. It's the first thing I want. I opened my mind. I got feet on the floor. It's like I hear kids up. I'm gonna see if I can hit legend this morning. It didn't happen. But you know, is that just like me being excited, or is that like an addictive kind of behavior?
I think it's when you start putting it ahead of responsibilities, ahead of family, ahead of friends, ahead of things that maybe you found important before, and all of a sudden this is taking the place of things that you found important before, that it becomes a dangerous thing. Because I don't think it's bad to be ambitious. I don't think it's bad to have drive and to want to
Nothing
do
wrong
well
to
at
have goals.
things. Right. These are
Right.
all good and healthy things. It's when you let it get to the point that it starts to eat up other things in your life and push the other things into the background and overcome everything else. And then that's when you got to start to take a look at it
So
and take a
Yeah.
step back.
I'd like to
Yeah, it's true.
say something that a lot of people are not really willing to go into, which is the fact that depending on how you look at this, actually bleeds over into worldview. And
Oh, absolutely.
This is 100% the uncharted territory that people say don't talk about, politics, don't talk about sex, and don't talk about
Religion.
religion. Those are the three things you
Mhm.
can never talk about. And so we're going to go into one of those categories that is actually relevant to our discussion, which is religion, because people think, worldview and religion are supposed to be separate categories, when in reality they're frankly not. And you can even wrap that up within cultural setup, because depending on where you're from, i.e., I'm in Japan, I definitely have studied this. I'm not saying I'm an expert in worldview, but my experiences to help you qualify where I'm coming from, again, not to validate what I'm saying, but to tell you where I'm coming from, is I was a Christian camp counselor for about 4 summers. One of those was a leadership member, and then the other side was I have a master's in cross-cultural study from the university that was connected to the camp that I was at. Okay. So, and all of my studies were geared towards East Asia, specifically Japan, whenever possible. So I don't want to get too divisive with this. I'm trying to give you more things to think about, okay? Just keep that in mind. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just trying to, you have a worldview. Someone else has a different one. So it's, it's only polite that you listen to it, regardless of how ridiculous it may sound, okay? So anyways, I wanted to cover all these grounds for the sake of iTunes reviews and comments we may be getting in the future and emails. But
Don't sweat it, Rob. Don't sweat
it.
Go ahead and tell us what you think.
The worldview here, in my opinion, on it, how you look at addiction is, from my particular worldview, which is the Judeo-Christian faith in more the evangelical circles, which is people are wired to worship something
Mm-hmm.
and people are broken. Those are like the two main, I guess you could say, presuppositions to interpreting how the worldview looks at, addictions and enjoyment of the world at large. And so because we're wired to enjoy what the deity or God in this sense has established as good, because it says in like the very opening chapters of the Bible, what he made, every time God makes something, he says it's good. So if you like something, whether or not man made it, or it's something that man made by virtue of the tools that God gave him, or by virtue of where you live, which is earth, and that, in the faith, they believe that God made earth. So everything else there is your tool by which you can enjoy it. Okay. And that means that you cannot, anything that you can enjoy in life is something that God made. And the only thing that changes it between a gray area of something that is good and something that is bad is kind of like how you do it or timing of when you do it, whether or not it's good or bad. And this starts getting into ethics. But if we go back to addiction is more of like the idea that you're worshiping something rather than enjoying something. And that's kind of the worldview of like what we used a lot of our resources when we were trying to analyze, other world religions and other worldviews and other cultures and how people kind of get into really bad habits in teenage years for counseling. And that doesn't just extend to teenagers. Like, this goes all through adulthood. And you could argue that the camp that I was at was more oriented to teaching life experiences and getting into the roots of people's worldviews and kind of uprooting them and having them look at who they are and what they believe right then and there, rather than really counseling, because they believe that, the staff should be the first grounds by which change is oriented, and then that can kind of issue forth from there to the campers and people that come in and teaching and all of that.
So
I don't wanna
basically,
get
if
too
you
much
make
into
something like
but-
the center of your world, if you're worshiping it, if you're seeing it like a god by any other name, it becomes the center
Right.
of your world.
More or less. But then it starts getting into, well, okay, Mr. Know-it-all, like what is worship then? Because now you have to start defining terms. Because now we're saying, well, it's not worship. I'm enjoying Hearthstone, or I'm not worshiping WoW. I'm enjoying it. It's a part of the community, and so it's like da 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 da. But like, again, you have to get kind of more down in the weeds to get there. But I'm not trying to get there too much. But I will say that you have to define worship by what something begins to start consuming and taking from you, or the reverse. It's something you start giving into. You're giving like, what are you giving it? What is it taking from you? That's what you need to start looking at, is kind of like, where's the exchange happening? Enjoying something is where sometimes you expend a resource and you do or use your senses to enjoy something, right?
Right.
But then when you worship something, it's more of the idea of kind of a warlock in WoW, I guess is the best way of saying it. Like, you're committing to this. Like, there's a blood pact and you're sealed the deal. Like, there is something there that has like connected you, and pulling out is going to hurt. That's kind of the idea.
Here's something that I was thinking, is that people a lot of times compare the amount of hours that they play video games to the amount of hours people watch TV and say, ha, look how many hours you watch TV. You're just as bad as me. But TV is not something that you are so invested in, that you are, associating your self-identity
It
with,
doesn't mean
and
that you
your
can't
pride.
be addicted to it, just to be clear.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But the people who are making those comparisons are leaving out all of the things that make gaming great. Like the amazing things that it can do for you, that you can interact with it, that you can have friends in it. Like, putting numbers side to side and saying, you watch this many hours of TV a week and I play this many hours of gaming, and we'll put them side by side, and it's not in any way the same thing, because TV is a passive experience for the most part. You're sitting there and you're watching, somebody else's made show, made movie, whatever. And I mean, you can get deeper into it by associating, like reading up on the characters and making fan fiction or fan art, or like, right? You can put your life into it in that kind of way. But in gaming, the interactiveness is the thing that can suck you in, because then it starts to be you It's not you passively watching TV or watching a movie. It's you involved in this. And then you start to associate yourself with the thing that you're doing.
Yeah,
Instead
your
of it just being a
identities
passive
start
thing.
becoming called into question. Your identity is no longer your name, but your gamer tag and your rank and your whatever. And this is something that you're going to see bleed over into game design. And I'm not saying the worship thing. I'm saying more of like the identity. Okay, so to transition out of this, I want to talk a little bit more about now, just like that was more of like food for thought rather than like I'm going to dive into this and say this is a thing, but I want to go into game design. But Grant, you want to say something before I move on?
Yeah. I was just thinking, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, is one of the things that almost all world religions have in common is the concept of sacrifice. In order to be part of X religion or belief, there's some form of sacrifice involved. Sacrifice is giving up something that is valuable to you, right? It's not a sacrifice if it's not valuable, right? Like if I'm a
They always
millionaire,
said it's
and
not
I
a
have-
sacrifice unless it hurts.
right? If I have gajillions of dollars, $1 million to donate to somebody for random reason is not a sacrifice. It's an act of goodwill, but it's not a sacrifice, right? Versus me sacrificing a couple grand would be a major sacrifice. You know what I mean? Because it's not that much money. When an entity, whether it be a video game, an organization, a job, starts putting you in a position that you need to start sacrificing things for the sake of whatever related to the entity, that is when you start getting into this is the God of me. This is the God that I'm choosing to serve. Now, one of the best kept secrets in America is the God most of us serve is us. We are very and like I had kind of said, and I don't know if Eve or Rob agrees with me here, but like a lot of one of the reasons we pursue certain things is for our name, our namesake, our well-being, our edification, our whatever you would say, whatever the reason is. We don't need to get lost in the weeds on like the particulars. and a lot of times for that sake or that purpose, we start sacrificing things. I have sacrificed good relationship with my family. I have sacrificed relationships with people at work, getting ahead in life. I've sacrificed a lot of things for the sake of being able to be good at something, at a video game, at music, at lots of other things. So in the sense, because of the nature and how I went about it, you could argue that whatever it was, whether it's Hearthstone or music or speaking a foreign language or making music or whatever, that became the local God of my life. And really the reality is like if I just look carefully enough, I would find that it was me. It was about me, my happiness, my life goals, whatever that is. And that can become your own God that you worship every day. You just don't know it. And so it's easy sometimes to, in my opinion, to pawn it off on something and say it's the fault of the whatever. You know what I mean? It's when it's really, it's just our fault. We did it because of something we wanted or needed. You know what I mean? I don't know if Eve.
I do want to say another thing about addiction, though, because I have a friend who is a recovering alcoholic, and sometimes the addiction is a way of coping.
Yeah.
It's not that it becomes your God and your be all and end all. It's a way that you can cope with the world. Sometimes the stress is too much.
Yeah, I agree with
sometimes
that.
Like
I agree with that too.
The things that hem us in and that push us down and crush us in life can be too much. And then some things, like for me, I don't think that, to a certain degree, I think maybe I went to video games because they did make me feel good about myself. I felt good because I was good at it and people gave me praise. But another part was escaping from a world that I wasn't handling very well. And I needed to face that world, and I needed to face my responsibilities and be an adult and, stand up. But part of it was going, I don't want to deal with this. I can't handle this. And just going to something that has rules and is well defined and has structure and is like, if I do this and I get this, and that makes sense to me, and it's so well defined. There's no manual for being a parent. And you never know when you're doing something right and it's working and you're a good mom. But if you play a game, it's like, if I do this and I get that, and there's a gold star, and I know I'm doing a good job, and so it's easier to understand.
I'm glad you brought that up like a lot, because that goes back into the worldview again, which is difficult because what happens is people start saying, well, if I'm worshiping the game, then that's very easy. I just remove the game, or I just remove
Right.
alcoholism, or whatever it is,
Right.
like the addiction, right?
Right.
When in reality, the addiction isn't the thing or the activity. The
It's a
addiction
symptom.
is it's a symptom of a bigger issue, which is what the root problem is. What is the root problem? The root problem is escape. And what is it that you're trying to escape from?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that you really want? Like, that's something that we brought up over and over again in our counseling structure is like, what is it that you want? Because you don't want the game. You want the structure. You want the safety. You want the escapism. You want to be in a world that's not present. You know, there's that thing. And then there's the other thing where if you don't want responsibility. So sometimes the addiction is not wanting something, you know.
Well, wanting to escape responsibility. Yeah.
You want safety rather, right? So it's kind of like you have to flip what is that you not want, and then flip that to what the opposite is, and then that's probably what you want, right? So Grant, what are you
Well,
going to say?
one of the questions of worldview is there something wrong with the world, and is there a salvation or an escape or a way of fixing it?
That's it. Yeah.
And so you're right, Eve. Addiction is not just merely looking for a quote unquote something to fill the void or a God to worship that all people have
Sent to.
inborn in them.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
it is well, something's wrong. What's going to fix it for me?
Mm-hmm.
Many people turn to self-made means, like whether it be out of a bottle or just being an overachiever. I feel it could take so many different kinds of forms. At least it's been my experience that it's many and varied, and we can't possibly know it all.
Mm-hmm.
But probably a good question to ask yourself is like, am I using X thing as a means to cope or get over or deal with or save myself from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my mother was adopted into a household that was not abusive, but she was not friendly, let's put it that way. And she spent her whole life like trying to be a people pleaser. You know what I mean? Her whole life trying to like measure up and prove and meet the standard, because that's how she copes with that experience. You know what I mean? And even though she mentally can sit here and go, yeah, I know that I don't get value from them, I don't get self-worth from them, yada 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 down. It's been burned into her to the point of where she has to watch that and know that that's sometimes she views fixing the problem with her world as like, well, I just got to do stuff for people, and I just got to work harder and be better and just like try like work
Worldview and culture always comes back to it.
To a certain degree, I almost blame books because I was inundated with these fantastic stories of adventure and amazingness. And there's never like long pauses in books where the guy just like goes to school and does his homework.
Unless you read Lord of the Rings.
You know what? I skipped past all those parts where they're just walking. The walking and walking, I just like skipped to the fun part. So it kind of almost builds you up as a kid in your imagination, and then life falls flat. It can't possibly live up to the imagination of writers and artists.
That ideal. You have Instagram and Facebook and Twitter where people only post about the things that they hate and the things that they love, and there's nothing like mundane between.
It's like you get to see the highlights all of the time. And then you're holding your life up to that, and it's impossible to live up to that hype. And so that's another part of escapism is like this life sucks.
Yeah,
I want something better. I want something more.
Mundane. It's the most important part because it shows how you actually can get to the highlights and how you can deal with the low valleys. Like something that again, I hate to make this more of a Judeo-Christian like ideal podcast. Just
here's the thing, Rob, it's because it's who we are, right? So whenever we talk about things that are important, this is the way we interpret the world. So it's really hard to talk about what we understand, what we interpret without bringing it into it. It just like
that's true.
It's impossible to extricate it from it, right?
Right. So the idea is that like the mundane is not just an investment, but is an investment. It is the point by which you prepare for the crucible, and the crucibles are what make the highs that much better. Highs are never fun if they're all the time, because then the highs are the mundane. If you hit a legend every day, then it's no longer a goal and it's no longer enjoyable. And that's why when Grant said, when you hit the goal, you chase the car. You need to chase the faster car, or you need to do it faster or stronger. I mean, it's that it's a Daft Punk song. It's like harder, faster, stronger, better, like whatever.
Yeah.
Like there's always something with an ER at the end that you need to keep doing. And I wanna close this because I know that we've covered this and we're kind of talking in circles about the same thing over and over again. So I want to get into the game
I think it's
design.
good talk.
It is a great talk, but we do need to move on. So the next thing is transitioning this into a game design philosophy. Because
I do have something to say about that.
But I want to frame it in a specific way before I let you talk. And that is when you create something to be a competitive genre or even have that as an aspect of your game, you have to do the dance, which is two categories in tandem, and they're always fighting against each other. And you want to know what those two things are? They are progression and competition. So you need to make sure that when you are climbing in any sense, whether it's an ELO is what they called it in League of Legends, or a ranking system, or a gold, silver, bronze, plat, diamond, masters, grandmasters thing that Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm have, or a legend number, whatever that arbitrary thing is, needs to have both a balance of progression, a sense of moving from one to the other, for players to feel like they've fulfilled goals and are enjoying the game and can slowly get up, right? And then you also have the reward-based structure, which is the competition, where it's balancing your progression with, are you actually good enough to be here? Can you play a diamond-level Hanzo, or are you actually a bronze tier player that really thinks that they're all that? Or are
it's like there's no point if you can't compare yourself to someone else.
Yeah, there has to be something where people are better than you.
Yeah.
And there has to be another sense of the phrase where some people are just better than you on a different day or in a different way. Like, I can't play Reinhardt, but sure as hell somebody else can. I can't play Q-Block, but I'm real good at Even Shaman, so ta-da. I'm not really good at tournaments, but I can hit Legend every month. You know, there is the balance of progression in a system and a competition mindset where people who get to a certain place deserve it. Otherwise, there's no reason for you to have it.
Right. That's true.
And again, this is what goes to the addiction, right? This is where addiction comes in, is when the balance is such that you feel good enough for the progression, even if you're not chasing the competition side. And with WoW, for example, WoW is a pure split. They have a competition and progression with PvP, and then they have a PvE side where they have a certain gate by which you have to get into the progression, and your achievements or your competition is only by nature blocked by how strong your gear is and how many of your mistakes can you cover before the health bar hits 0. Because that's basically what it is. It's a giant boss. You got a bunch of other people helping you, covering your ass. You can get there.
Yeah.
So in a sense that where games are pure progression, those players can be typically addicted easier, I guess is maybe the wrong way of saying it, but you kind of maybe get my drift.
This is what I wanted to touch on, was that even though one of my biggest, like, worst monster addictions was World of Warcraft, I don't want to demonize it, right? I don't want to say that game is addictive, you know, those words, because they're really good at making games and they're really good at making, you know, well done games. But I know, like, intentionally addictive games. I know mobile games that were pathologically made to tap into your brain and make you want to keep playing. I think the word for them is Skinner boxes. And they are made to suck you in and to grab you and to not let you go.
Money.
Yeah, and to take your money. Like, I mean, that's the biggest part of it. But also just to get your brain hooked so that you feel like you have to keep coming back. I've played a couple of them on mobile, and they've had their hooks in me before I kind of woke up and went, oh, this is one of those games.
I have one of those last year, actually. There's a game called Hyper Heroes that took me in, and I was full strung into it, and I couldn't get out. And I mean, it was stealing my money at that point.
And I mean, you can't blame yourself too much for those because they're made to get to the human mind in a psychological way, and that is evil. Okay, the people who prey on people who play video games and make those games specifically to target them is just morally wrong, in my opinion. But these other games that I played and I've gotten addicted to, I don't blame Blizzard. I don't say World of Warcraft is an addictive game. Depending on the person who's playing it, it might not be at all.
Yeah, I can't get into it.
Right.
I can't.
I noticed that they introduced the free weekend this weekend. And you know what? I downloaded it. I logged in. I select the character I want to check out. I realized that all of the 50,000 add-ons that I couldn't play the game without weren't installed. I looked around my mounts for about 5 minutes, and I was like, okay. And I uninstalled the game.
So you just have to kind of know yourself and the thing that you're using games for. Because if it is a pastime and, you know, a minor escape and something that you like making goals for, and it's something that's not taking up your whole life, then you're probably good. Because it's okay to have pastimes and it's okay to enjoy games. And I'm not telling you all, like, beware of games that'll suck you in and you'll be an addict. That's not it at all. It's person to person. It's what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with, your makeup, your mental makeup, you know, your needs, your desires. And each game is different and can be completely healthy when taken in, you know, a normal, healthy way.
Grant?
I agree with you. I think that it's really easy to pawn personal issues that take place up here or in here on a third party, whether it's a game, a person, a substance. You know what I mean? Like my sister is a full-blown drug addict, like hardcore. Like, we'll make a cocktail out of whatever's handy, like crazy. And to a point, I could say, well, you know, the drugs did this to her. But then I look at her life, and I know this because I know her, she's my sister, that she made a lot of choices. She made a lot of bad choices that led to the point of where she is now. You know what I mean? It's not just that the drugs are, you know, just like for example, cigarette companies aren't responsible for the fact that somebody picked up a cigarette once and tried it. You know what I mean? Yeah, they might be making them more addictive, more potent than maybe they ever were. And that's an interesting concept, and that's an interesting problem. But nobody made somebody smoke a cigarette. Of course, you could argue about like secondhand smoking and that kind of stuff.
The range of influence and peer pressure and how people are wired. Yeah. I mean, there's always...
I would say it just makes it more difficult to give up. That's what it is.
Right.
It
Like,
makes
you
it difficult
get
to
in,
give up.
you get yourself in, and then depending on the addiction, it's whether or not it makes it nearly impossible on your own to get out.
And let's be real clear, Grant and Eve, and just the community at large, people are wired differently. And people have different cultures, different worldviews. People have completely different environments in which they grew up and where they developed into. And so all of these are factors. There is an infinitude of factors. But all we're trying to do here is, maybe I would say the punchline is awareness, and just be careful and be good to each other. I think that's
Because
what we're really
I
getting
will
at
never
tonight.
be a drug addict because I don't care about drugs. I'll never be an alcoholic because I don't like the taste of alcohol. And it doesn't make me a stronger person because I never drank. It's because that doesn't do it for me. It doesn't
Right.
push my buttons. Like, somebody else, if that's what it does for them, then that's their addiction. And gaming does it for me. It pushes all my buttons and makes me happy in different ways. So that's why it's my struggle. It's the thing that I deal with. And everybody, I mean, I think everybody has their own thing to different degrees.
Everybody has their own poison, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it can take many different forms. And
Everyone has their own kryptonite.
well, yeah, it's true. I mean, and I think the best thing to do is to show charity. If somebody says, "Man, I just think I have an addiction for this," don't say, "No, you don't." Don't ever do that.
Please
to
don't
somebody.
do that.
I'm struggling with this one thing. I know you're not struggling. You're fine. It's like,
Just
no,
play
well,
even shaman. It'll be fine.
you're fine. I mean, like, wouldn't that be a pretty crappy thing to do? To be like, Eve, I know you're addicted to Warcraft, but you know what? You're fine. Just make a couple different life choices and you'll be fine. Like, no, I really think I have a problem with this. No, you'll be fine. You know, how uncaring and insensitive would that be? You know what I mean?
Well, I had people in my life try to downplay it when I talked to them about it. And it was really hard for me to admit to other people because I was hiding it for a long time.
Mm.
So to do that, to kind of like pick up your courage and be like, I need to tell you about something, and them to kind of be like, what? Like, that's not even a thing. Like, you're just having some me time. You're just taking care of yourself. It's fine. Like, your kids are fine. Everything's fine. And you're like, okay, now who do I talk to? Like,
The key word here, guys, the punchline is always community and empathy. Because ultimately, I think with our community, all we want is people to feel like they're not getting we don't want people to feel like they're getting coddled. That's for sure. If you have a problem, we're gonna help you. Like that's what we want. We want people to help each other.
if you come to us, we will give you advice.
Yeah, I mean we're not gonna coddle you. We're not gonna. Some people might sugarcoat it, and others might not. And depending on who you are and how you're wired, one of those might be better. You might need somebody to sugarcoat it for you. I know my wife and I have had this talk multiple times. I told her, I was like, look, if I've got an issue, you got to be forthright. You got to tell me what is up. Up and down the street.
That's
okay?
what works
tell
with
me
me
what
too.
It is. Be specific. All right.
I don't like beating around the bush and like trying to come at it diplomatically. I'm just tell me straight up, please.
And then,
I prefer that way.
And then like when it's the reverse side, it's like I need to come at, you need to speak softly. You need to bring with it some empathy and say, look, I think I know where you're coming from here. And be kind. The lost art of humankind, being kind. There's all kinds of things that we could touch on here, and I do feel like we want to close the show here, but I've been watching a lot of stuff with Carrie, and we kind of found actually like playing Dungeons and Dragons has been just a great release for both of us to do something together that is still gaming and yet not like competitive and not progression based. It's just more of like telling the story, being involved in something that's not yourself, exploring a different flavor of who you are by pretending to be something you're not, just for the sake of
role play.
It's fun. And I've been watching Matt Mercer and the Critical Role cast do the same thing, and their whole mantra is just like, be good to each other. Just
sounds like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures motto: be excellent to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. So if you hear somebody talking about their struggle with addiction, please don't laugh it off. Don't downplay it. Don't, make a joke about it. It's possible that that's a cry for help. It's possible that they're looking for somebody to actually listen and just try and be compassionate.
Don't overstep your bounds if you don't know the person. Maybe maybe the best thing for you to just say, yeah, I hear you. That
listening is half the battle.
That is the hardest thing for people to even just say. They're like, I feel like I have to fix this, or I don't want to get involved because I don't really know anything about this. So the fact that you say, look, I'm listening is like beyond what you want. Like people just want to have community, and that's part of every worldview. People in individual societies feel like they're so self-focused that they don't really have any identity anymore, and they want to identify in a community. And then you have the collectivistic societies that get ostracized outside of a community or don't feel like they belong, and it's rough. It's real rough because it's hard to get back in when you're out. So,
true story.
I think are we a consensus that this is game over? All right.
Let's land this plane. Let's land it.
Land this plane. Okay. Guys, if you wanna reach out, head out to our Discord, Velen's Chosen, or discord.me/Velen's Chosen. If you want to find anything to do with this week's episode, just hit us up there. We have a podcast questions, feedback. You can do whatever you'd like. iTunes reviews are appreciated, not necessary. Thanks to those of you who are on patreon.com/Velen's Chosen supporting the show. And Jamie S. I know that we didn't mention him last week on the show, so double thanks for being awesome and not yelling at us for being a sponsor. You're great. We really appreciate it. And just be good to each other, guys. Remember, not all who wander are lost. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.